Fragility. So, recently, there were, I guess, like two criticisms of this book. So, I guess we should back up here. Okay, so White Fragility is a book by an author named Robin DiAngelo. It's an okay book. I read it. It's alright. Shit. Oh, wrong button. How the fuck? Jesus Christ. I downloaded this ebook reader so I can, like, pull it in. Okay, whatever. Good enough. So White Fragility is a book by an author named Robin DiAngelo. She's basically like one of those like corporate like sensitivity training people. The book itself, it's okay. Like it's this is the hottest take. I neither hate the book nor do I love the book. Okay, down the road, centrist as fuck on this one topic. So I'll split the book into like basically halves, I guess. First half. Actually, I'll label the first half up to chapter. I guess it's more than half. I guess the first like 70% of the book is kind of interesting. So here she goes through like the history of shit, what the fuck? God damn, this ebook reader sucks. Okay. Whatever, good enough. Every single thing here is like clickable. I don't know if that's good. It seems like very poor design. Alright. So like 1 through like 8 or so, I guess. Maybe 8, less than 8. Maybe 1 through 6. I think these are really good. They give like a pretty in-depth like background of like the conception of whiteness in like American history and how it feeds into structures. There's also a criticism of like individualism in here, which sort of we'll get into that a little bit later too. But there's a criticism of like individualism and how basically when you tie like anti-racism and individualism together, you just hold people accountable for their individual actions, which ignore the effects of structural issues that impact individuals. For example, like there's a study. What's it called? Why is it Letitia and Laquan, I think, are less employable? Let's see. All right, Emily, Greg, more employable than Lakeisha and Jamal. All right. I got that a little wrong. Dude, that shows off my White Fragility right there, that I just gave them both weird L names. But yeah, the gist of this article, or this research, this is even the article? I don't think this is the article, it's just a Medium post on it, but basically, there's a research article on this, and the gist of it is that with the same exact resume, Lakeisha and Jamal get less callbacks than Emily and Greg because they sound black. Right, so there are systemic issues that do feed into discrimination just on that structural level, just on our perceptions as humans, and it does oftentimes happen at a subconscious basis, which sucks. Sucks to be black. And I think she does a really good job going in depth in that. Now, here's the problem, which she is probably self-aware of to an extent. The more in-depth she goes into on this, the less like top level, the more specific she gets, the less widespread this is going to appeal to. So this book is probably accessible to about 20 to 25% of the US population. I personally don't care, so it doesn't bother me to read this stuff. And I'll go, oh, you're a big racist, blah, 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 like whatever, you hate white people, blah, 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 blah. No, she's going to get that response. The more detail she goes in, and specifically using a term like white fragility, you're going to trigger white people. But she's perfectly aware of that. This book should not be taken as a structural critique, but a self-help book for woke people who think they want to go. She even addresses this, right? She'll have liberal-minded friends, left-leaning people who think they're not racist, and they, like, you know, have a class with her or whatever, when she's like, hey, this is what you did that was kind of fucked up. This is what you're doing that's fucked up. They get super bothered. So I think this book is best viewed as that sort of, it's a self-help book basically for people who think they're sufficiently woke, and then it'll give you a little more insight into the history of racism, how you might be doing it inadvertently, the subconscious. Oh shit. That's cool. I'm just dying over here. Nice. The subconscious ways you might be doing it. Like, for example, I don't know if it was in this book or in another one. Basically, like, when white people describe someone as well-spoken, like, that's disproportionately just used to describe black people. Like, oh, like Obama was such a well-spoken person, or like I met this really well-spoken. I had this teacher, super well-spoken, and it's like yeah, but like that term is like really used exclusively to describe like minorities. You're like, oh wow, they weren't like an illiterate like slum person, you know, like that's what it's used for. And it's kind of funny because you have like all these little ticks, right? I think one thing she goes into that's kind of interesting, um, is where is it? Is it? It might be in the anti-blackness chapter, number 6 over here. I don't know if you guys can see my mouse. Actually, I should check that setting. I think you can because it shows up on the preview, but whatever. I think it's in the anti-blackness chapter, and she talks about how white people basically we use this coded language, and she's 100% correct on this. If you think through your life, you'll probably recognize it a little bit. Like you'll talk about like good neighborhoods and bad neighborhoods, and she goes through like an experience she had where she was like applying for a job to like a new school. Keep in mind, academia, usually pretty left leaning. She's in like a sociology department, tends to be much more left leaning than even academia in general, for good reason, not for bad reasons. But they're like, oh, if you're gonna move here, like make sure you don't go to this neighborhood or that neighborhood, you know, whatever. And she's like, huh. So sure enough, she like goes home and she looks up these like 2 neighborhoods they mention, and they're like the most black neighborhoods in that area. And she talks about how like there's this like it creates a plausible deniability where you can say these are bad neighborhoods, and what you mean, what's implied by that is like it's a largely minority neighborhood. There's a lot of black people live there. Oh, there's a lot of crime. Blah blah blah. And I think she goes into some people like, oh, black people are just low income and therefore you know they're more predisposed to crime because blah, blah. Like they'll go through all this backwards justification, but like what's being said there is it's using coded racial language to express something, but not in a racial way, but something that we all understand what it means, even if we aren't actively acknowledging it. I thought that was kind of interesting that she used like that anecdote and how like she went home and she like looked it up and was like, yep, that's what it was. Because I don't know if they knew specifically what she was applying for or like what her area of research was, but it was just kind of funny that like you go to like the wokeness professor, I guess, you know, and they try and like, I wish this thing had a control F function, but it doesn't. But well, it actually doesn't work. It just does it for like this individual page. It's really ridiculous. Intro, like it's just on the one page I'm on. Like what a useless control F function. But whatever. Shoot. But yeah, it's kind of dumb. So anyway, we're gonna look at like 2 articles that critique this. First, this is very upsetting because Matt Taibbi's book is fucking great. He wrote this book called The Divide. Excellent book. Fucking, this is like I read this book like 2 months ago, and it was really great because it goes into like the economics. It basically it's kind of like 2 books in one, but like he does it to like draw like this contrast, and it's really really cool. He compares how we treat like basically the criminals during the recession, like bankers, other people on Wall Street who like crash the world economy by like doing criminal things. And he has a very like conversational tone. He's an excellent writer, and compares that with like how we just like hassle poor people and black people over like nonsense, and particularly black people is what he focuses on, and how we just like hassle the fuck out of them. And he's right. This is an excellent book. I'd recommend it to anybody. But he like makes this article on her, and it's like it's really like over the top. Like it attacks the fuck out of her. So like, let's see. I had a couple of things I highlighted here. It says like she might be the first person to like Hitlerian race theory. White fragility is a small message. No such thing as a universal human experience. We are defined by our individual personalities or moral choices, but only by our racial category. I don't think this was really her point. Like the just like F from her book is basically like we need to stop like pretending like that what's it called, like race neutrality basically. What's the term? Hold on, I have it written here. I call it like colorblind racism. I pretend that we don't see race. Like that's bad because like in America right now, being born black has like implicit and like explicit like bad things to it, right? Statistically, you're probably born to a lower income family who has like less opportunities, who have been ravished by our criminal justice system. Blah 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 blah. Something Matt Taibbi would very much agree with. Man, do I even say his name right? Taibbi? I think I do. I don't know. He's got a show where I'm sure he says his name at some point, or someone has to say his name. I think it's Taibbi. But like he wouldn't disagree with that, and her point was more so like you can't like desegregate this and view this through like that individualistic lens. Like we need to view like the collective of how like the white identity intersects with like a black identity, and how like being viewed as black is negative. Like you'll have like oh shoot, hold on. I don't even know how I would Google this study. I don't even remember when I read it, but let's give it a shot. Black little black kids identify themselves as bad. When black children bias towards lighter. Okay, yeah. Okay, whatever. It's a CNN article, but let's see if we can get the study from it. But basically, like even like little kids like implicitly understand these like racial biases. She actually talks about this in her book too. I don't think she touches on this specific study, but she talks about how like young kids can adopt like their parents like racial beliefs and stuff, but what she doesn't really talk about is something like this, which is like a structural issue, right? Even black children are biased towards lighter skin colors. Let's see, black child is dumb because she has dark skin. So like, white child looks at a picture of a black child and says she's bad because she's black. A black child says a white child is ugly because he's white. Wait, a black child says a white child is ugly because he's white. A white child says a black child is dumb because she has dark skin. A black child says a white child is ugly because he's white. I'm so confused. Full article, full doll study. I think this is the one I was thinking of, actually. I think this is an old study, though. Well, that's not going to open correctly because it's a PDF. The Spencer study. I think this is the one I'm thinking of. Full coverage? Whatever. I guess the gist of it. I think this is the one I'm thinking of. Young children, a series of questions, how them answer pointing. I guess it's a really old study, if that's the one I'm thinking of. Basically, like, even black people have a negative conception of their self. There was like a debate between, I think it was like Vosh and Destiny against like two Nazis, and they mentioned how like even black people are more predisposed to like be biased against black people. Like, are you saying black people can be biased against black people? And it's like, yes, that is systemic racism. It can make even black people hate black people at a systemic level, where you have biases against these groups built into your fucking head, in like ways that you wouldn't necessarily realize. So, like, he agrees with this. So I don't know why he's necessarily criticizing this, because that's not really what she was saying. But he takes a whole lot of things out of context. D'Angelo instructs there's nothing to be done here except strive to be less white. So she qualifies this. She describes, like, whiteness in a certain way, and she says, like, we need to, like, strive to be less that. And she says, like, the conception of, like, whiteness is, like, built into, like, this superiority, that just being white is in and of itself good. And that inverse to that, being dark is bad, is basically what she's saying here. But when you like clip this out into like these 5 words, like yeah, that doesn't look good, but like you don't give like the explanation, that you don't even give like a summary of what she means by that. So like, yeah, she's like, it's like a 400 fucking page book or something. Like, yeah, she has a more in-depth explanation for that, and like you could disagree with it, because like I'm gonna get to where I think she's shit in a little bit, but or where she fucks up. Like I said, the first like 6 chapters, fucking fantastic. Even some of these are pretty good. The conclusion is where she like kind of shits the bed a bit. But that's okay. It's hard to solve problems. Describing problems is way easier than solving problems, and she does a good job describing certain problems. Terrible job trying to solve them. Which is why I say her work is best viewed as like a self-help book. Where's the other one? This is a really cringe thing he calls her out on over here. Dingbat. You know, I've been using the word dingbat lately, and I realized I must have pulled it from this article now that I'm reading it here. That's funny. So this is great. I'm gonna just read this part out loud. D'Angelo doesn't grasp. The joke flopped. Oh, okay. When one employer responds negatively to the training, D'Angelo quips the person must have been put off by the black female team members, the white people, she says, were scared of Deborah's hair. D'Angelo explaining how Hale was fault for making a bad joke when she was facilitating it. Okay, so this is he actually misrepresents this, which makes it worse. That okay, this is gonna be cringe, and what he writes here is more cringe than it actually was, but it was still pretty cringe. Okay, so I'll read the whole segment here in his article, and then I'll tell you why it's actually being misquoted, making it more cringe while still sort of being cringe. If you're wondering what that might look like, here's D'Angelo explaining how she handled the fallout from making a bad joke while she was facilitating anti-racism training at the office of one of her clients. When one employee responds negatively to the training, D'Angelo quips the person must have been put off by one of the black female team members. The white people, she says, were scared by Deborah's hair. White priests of anti-racism like D'Angelo seem universally to be more awkward and clueless around minorities than your average Trump-supporting construction worker. D'Angelo doesn't grasp the joke flopped and has to be told 2 days later that one of the web developer clients was offended. In despair, she writes, I seek out a friend who is white and has a solid understanding of cross-racial dynamics. After D'Angelo confesses her feelings of embarrassment, shame, and guilt to the enlightened white cross-racial dynamics expert, everyone should have one of these such persons on speed. Man, he bitched about her writing, but reading this is fucking hard. She approaches the offended web developer. She asks, would you be willing to grant me the opportunity to repair... Okay, this is a verbatim quote. That is cringe. Would you be willing to grant me the opportunity to repair the racism I perpetuated toward you in that meeting? At which point, the web developer agrees, leading to a conversation establishing the parameters of problematic joke resolution. The South Park comparison is kind of funny, but, like, he butchers it, okay? So... this makes it seem like what's funny is I hadn't finished I started reading the book like months ago, and I didn't find it like all that interesting. Like, not that I didn't find it interesting. It was good because I was in the beginning portions of it, right? I don't read books back to front. The back is where she fucks up. And I was like, oh, okay, this is all right. And then I went to read other things that I found more interesting, and then I eventually finished this book after he wrote this article because I'm like, man, does she really go like into Hitlerian race theory as he describes it? So anyway, this is not actually the context of where this was made. So she was in a web developer meeting with 2 people she was friends with, and then the new web developer, I think all these people were black, and she was a white lady. Do we have a picture of her? Let's get Robin D'Angelo. This is her. She literally looks like exactly like you would expect. It's kind of funny. Where the hell is it? Where's my boy Matt? Come on, Matt. There you go. So it doesn't take place at a office of one of her clients. It takes place in like her office, or maybe it's an officer of one of her clients. It's weird, but this to me seems like she's teaching like a seminar, and she makes this joke at the expense of like one of the black people she's with's hair, like in front of a group, which is not what happens. She's like in a conference with like 4 people, and one of which is someone who she has just met, who's like their black web developer. And what she did that was like kind of rude was like a little bit more than what is said here, but she like makes the joke about one of her coworkers, which like in that group is probably fine, but it was with the new person where like she's bringing up like hair or whatever, and how like it made people uncomfortable, which like made the joke sort of inappropriate. And then someone mentions it to her a couple of days later, and the reason she goes to her like woke friend, as she describes it, is she like says like you just need to be able to go to someone who you can trust will be honest with you and not just try and comfort you. And in her case, she said she went to this person because they wouldn't just try and comfort her. Like, I have friends or like people who I would talk to who I know would give me like an honest like hey man, like let's say I had an issue with like in like a relationship or something, right? Who I'd be like, hey man, I'm gonna tell you what happened here, and you tell me if I'm the dick or they're a dick, you know? And so you like, you know, lay out what happened, and they're like, you're a dick or they're a dick or whatever, you know? So it's people I trust to give honest, not just trying to make me feel better, but to give like honest feedback, and that's what she's talking about here. In her case, it was someone who was in this similar field to her, did this similar thing, and then when she gave the explanation, was like, yeah, you're fucked up. You don't need a white cross-racial dynamics expert. You just need someone who will give you honest feedback. That's what you need. And in this case, I guess it might be harder to find someone who can like devolve themselves or like understand the white experience and how you were being a dick in that context without realizing it. But whatever. I think you could find people who will tell you that, honestly. That's what he's getting at there. So like this is sort of taken out of context, and this is like probably like a page and a half or something. It wasn't like a huge section what he's quoting here. So that's kind of retarded. But yeah, like here's the thing. Like I said, her book can only really appeal to like the most wokest 25% of American culture. And her solution is sort of like, we need to teach people to be like more aware of like their whiteness and how like interplays in society. And if you could mandate this book in like, I don't know, every fucking like college classroom, or I don't know, senior year of high school in the country, maybe it would have some sort of positive impact. I don't know. It's okay. I think the history thing is good, and but her solution here tends to be like, we need to be more aware of this so we can individually do better. Now this train of thought is very similar, and like the metaphor I'll use to describe it is when people try and pretend like if we stop getting straws from Starbucks, this will solve climate change. It's stupid, right? There's systemic reasons that go, or systemic things that go into the way American like consumerism drives an economy around consumption, which leads to more things being used, which increases like pollution and consumption, and like, you know, the giant blob of like plastic that exists in the ocean that's like the size of Texas or whatever. Like that's what goes into this. You stopping drinking straws is like, I don't even know, like throwing a paper towel into the ocean if you're trying to like stop flooding or something, you know? Like it's not going to do a goddamn thing. It'll make you feel better, but it's not going to actually like fundamentally impact this. So trying to like combat like, I don't know, climate change through individualism is going to be about as impactful as trying to combat racism through individualism, which is what she's attempting to do, right? We need to individually be better and more aware about how we like racially impact each other, and like that's how we're going to solve problems, you know? We're going to like be more aware of like how our whiteness impacts like these people and how we need to be able to talk about stuff, and like that's clearly not really going to work. Like having a systemic solutions to these problems is probably where you want to like approach this from, right? She even talks about how affirmative action has been destroyed, but is still like dragged out to explain how black people are giving to, or like how our society contributes to like racism against whites, because like we have affirmative action, but like racism usually connotates like using your race to like make people do worse. But like when you're using policies that are like affirmative action, which are designed to like bring up groups that are like historically destroyed, that's not really racism. It's weird. I'm too lazy to explain it here. It's like a whole different video, but whatever. Yeah, but like this criticism is just kind of weird, because it just like like Matt Taibbi's focus seems to be more so on like her cringe moments, which there are cringe moments in this book. There are so many cringe moments because the more woke she attempts to be, she gets like really good detail, but like she has moments like the one I cited where she's like, please, how could I please attempt to rectify the racism I perpetuated against you? And it's like, chill, dog. Like you've removed all human interaction from this ostensibly human interaction. Like it's like two robots that were programmed by some fucking weeb who hasn't been outside in like 2 decades, who has just read like, I don't know, like race and sociology literature for the last like 400 years, who made the most like, actually I shouldn't say race and sociology, I should say like corporate, like his instruction of this is like corporate horseshit, like this whole like neutrality just combined into this one sentence that's just like cringe as fuck, devoid of like humanity, is what she sort of did here. Like it's really whitewashed. It's like, yo, just come to me as a person, just be like, yo, I fucked up, can I apologize? And like that would have been, if she just said like, hey, I was kind of a dick, you mind if we talk about it? Like that would have been way more human than, can I address this racism I perpetuated against you? It's kind of ridiculous. But yeah, like she identifies how individualism plays into racism and then says like, we need to individually be better. But it's like, no, you can't do that. We need to like have some sort of systemic approach to how to fix these things, right? Like, for example, like Medicare for all, and like not tying healthcare things to race, or getting rid of food deserts. So like, you know, you'd have less like obesity in the black community is really bad, right? Obesity, I'm too lazy to look this up, but like obesity in black community, obesity in African Americans, Office of Minority Health, women have the highest rates of obesity. Okay, so like black women have the highest rates of, let's say, percentage of person 20 years over overweight or obese. So black men tend to be skinnier than white men? Non-Hispanic black. Okay. But like, okay, there we go. Sorry, it was just sometimes it takes me a second to be able to read a goddamn chart. So like, okay, non-Hispanic black women tend to be significantly more obese than non-Hispanic white women, right? So like these are not like just necessarily cultural things. There are structural reasons for this. For example, like food deserts in places like Compton make it so if you're born into these impoverished areas, it's very hard for you to find nutritious, healthy food to eat. Like the place you'll be able to get food is going to be at like a fast food joint or like a convenience store, like a bodega or something that will sell prepackaged food. Like you're not gonna be able to go like eat an apple. You'd have to go get like, you know, I don't know, like apple flavored, like an apple tart or something like that. Like that's what you'll have access to in these areas, which make it so you're more predisposed to living an unhealthy lifestyle, which makes you predisposed to things like COVID-19 because the black death rate of COVID is like 3 times that of white people in the United States right now. It's just ravaging the black community in this country. But like that's systemic in nature, right? So we can talk about things like this and how we can address these systemic issues that lead to this perception that associates like darkness and being black with this negative attitude that white people have towards them. Like those could be things you talk about, which at a policy level you can just fix, right? You can try and like expand food stamps, expand like food kitchens, expand like grocery stores into these areas, like create like subsidies to prop these things up. There's a lot of stuff you can do to address something like this, like as inconsequential as that, right? You could destroy the prison industrial complex, which Matt Taibbi would seemingly be very on board with. You can get rid of that and like punish bankers instead. You know, fill up all that empty space with like 1 million bankers. It'll be great. You know. But she doesn't do that. She identifies that individualism is actually part of the problem, and then her solution was individualism instead of like systemic wide changes that can like affect this stuff from like the outside, like molding it, which is stupid. It's a very 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 dumb solution, but like I said, her strength here is in describing the problem in these first 6 to 8 chapters, and then like she falls apart like here. All the White Women's Tears thing is sort of interesting too, but I think that like here, so this basically the way you can look at this is each chapter gets like systemically more woke after like 4. How does race shape the lives of white people? I think the Good Bad Binary is a great chapter too. Actually, that's a really good chapter. Yeah, but like this book is completely inaccessible. So like, the comparison I'd give it to is Dog Whistle Politics. Dog Whistle Politics is a book by Ian Haney Lopez, really cool guy. This book came out in 2014 too, so it's like even older than her book, and it goes over almost everything she's talking about, but kind of gives a top level view on it, and then makes it like more accessible. Like he talks about her whole thing on colorblind racism. He talks about that, but doesn't make it as like unbearable as she does. His book is very well written, very excellent book, and he talks about how this type of politics and like racism has been like consciously and unconsciously used. It's actually a large portion of like one of the other videos I did, which I guess I'll put in the conclusion section because I have a new conclusion. Spoiler, by the way, the outro to my video is new. But yeah, he does like a really good. He's basically a version of like history that would be accessible, or his version of like her book basically, but that would be accessible to like 60% of our population, when hers is like accessible to like 25% of our population due to the language they each choose to use to demonstrate their points. But his book is, I would say, much better because I think it gives that like hey, how is this worked at like a macro level, and he does like a better focus on the macro level when describing like the individualist problem. He discusses it, and then he actually gives a solution. Like when I talk about how you address like racism, this is where I largely pulled it from in that other video as well, where he says like the way you make people aware of this, you talk about you don't directly attack people, which she seems to be aware of as well. It doesn't really help with telling people they're being racist. God damn it, stupid HOA is calling me. I'll call him back in a little bit. That directly confronting people on racism or problematic behavior doesn't help, but instead like letting them know like, hey, when we did like the Willie Horton ad, which we discussed in the other video, that this was actually like meant to be racist and was specifically done to like stoke racial tension, and that is what helps people be aware of it. And she discusses that as well. Sorry, I don't think she discusses the Willie Horton ad in particular, but she kind of discusses that idea in general. But like, I think his solution seems to be better at the end of that, of pointing out the racism and explaining how it's racist and letting people be aware of like, hey, they were doing the racism. Although, admittedly, it was written before the age of Trump, so I don't know. People's ability to deny like obviously racist things in the modern era seems like a little worse than it was in 2014. I guess I don't know. Maybe I'm jaded by recency bias. Who the fuck knows? Oh yeah, and the other criticism was on TMBS, and their criticism was actually pretty good. I think they focus too much on like how her book sucks because she's like a corporate lawyer or whatever. Not a corporate lawyer, sorry. She's like a corporate sensitivity trainer. I'm gonna like compress their 19-minute video down to that though. Basically, like they're like, oh, she's just preaching like corporate bullshit, and I'm like, yeah, like if you look at it from that lens, it's pretty bad. But like if you want to be like, you know, a little more, bit more woke and a little bit like more sensitive, and you're already somewhat in that space, this is basically just a self-help book, you know. Like I could acknowledge, for example, that like self-help books, like I don't want to say Jordan Peterson because that guy sucks, but like Anthony Robbins or whatever, Tony Robbins, or is it Tony Robbins? Tony Robbins. I had a friend who recommended these books, and I tried listening to it, and it's just like the like only you can help yourself, have a positive mental state, which what he's saying is actually all true, but it's like I don't know, like he's just a motivational speaker, and like he writes books like that, and it doesn't work for me. It works for some people. Whatever. I tried. I got through like I don't know, like a third. I don't know if it was a book or like a speech or something. I really don't know, but I don't even fucking remember. But yeah, this is not my shtick right here. Not my shtick at all. But like that helps some people, right? It can help you function in an environment where like you have so I would say the culture of Americanism like destroys like a sort of sense of meaning and makes it hard for certain people to be like motivated and like find purpose in life. I think he can help people like develop systems to where they can cope with this environment, right? But I wouldn't say like everybody, you need to just like do this and it's gonna like save, like it's gonna help you and make your life better, you know? I wouldn't try and pitch that as a solution. I'd say, hey, we should try and work towards things where like you're not tied to a dead-end job which is making you depressed because of healthcare, right? Like I literally work for my job because it provides free education and free healthcare, even though the pay sucks. I like the people I work with, but like whatever. But like the pay is like mediocre, but I get like my master's degree for free, and I'm getting what's it called, like really good health insurance. But like if I didn't get if like we as a society were like health insurance and medical were just included, like I could demand higher wages or go to a different job I'd have more fun at. Like I used to work in IT and now I don't anymore. But the only reason I don't do that is because like when I went for an IT job and I was like, hey, I think it was like Amazon I was like talking to. They're like, hey, would you be interested in a job with us? And I'm like, yeah, what are your benefits? And they just ignored me after that. They just like when I was like, yeah, what are your benefits? Like I'm interested, but like I want to know like what your benefits are, because the benefits here are really great. So like why would I go to you if like my benefits are equivalent to like, I don't know, in total probably like $12 more an hour or something, which is like $24,000 a year. So I'm getting like 24. It might even be more than that. We'll say 24 to like $30,000 in benefits is what I'm receiving as part of my compensation package, and it's like that makes it sound like I make a lot of money. I don't. I make like $40K a year, a little less than $40K a year. But like my benefits are equivalent to like $30,000 a year. So it's like, oh, with this I'm doing pretty well. But like whatever. But like yeah, like these are like a stopgap in our broken system. Here's how you can kind of like be a better person. The same way Tony Robbins is like, hey, our system's broken, it's breaking your brain. Here's how you can be a better person. Is basically what they're both doing. But they don't address like, hey, let's make the system stop being broken, which is sort of what TMBS is getting at. Like she doesn't really address that, which they are correct about. But she does a great job at identifying systemic problems and how white fragility and whatever play into those systemic problems. We're not going to watch the whole thing. But I generally like TMBS. But Michael Brooks, man, he was even in defense of like soccer and shit during the fascism video I made the other day. Or the other day, I guess it was like 2 weeks ago. But it's like, yeah, man, oh fuck. Let me down lately, Michael. Let me the fuck down. Very, very discouraging. Don't even know what the hell that's to. But yeah, so I guess we kind of just went over why I think so. I would say, I guess in summation, her book is okay. The first 6 to 8 things, pretty good, very good describing the problem. Her last 4, huge pain in the ass. But it's only like meant to appeal to like the lower 25, or sorry, the most woke 25% of the population, and even that, some of it, like if you're directly confronted with some of the things she's saying, it'd be a bit hard to read. But the way she describes it, I really don't think it's that controversial. Matt Taibbi, very disappointing the way he like cherry picked certain things, removed some context, and like didn't explain what she meant. It's like, yeah, it's academic writing. Like if I define a term in a way that's somewhat unconventional, or like I give a more detailed explanation for when like when she's saying white identity, she's like, here's specifically what I mean by whiteness. When I talk, she says this in her first chapter. Here is what I mean by whiteness. Here is what I'm talking about. And then he rips out like her thing of being white is bad. And it's like, yeah, in her last chapter, her last like a couple of chapters, she gets pretty like intense with saying like, we need to be less white. But she had qualified what she means by being less white, and what she described being white as in that respect would be agreeable. Now you can disagree with that being an intrinsic to whiteness, but you can't just pull out her saying we need to be less white and then like criticize that for like its conventional meaning instead of what she said it means here, which is what you want to criticize. So like this was a little bit of a hacky article. This was a better critique, but I don't know if she really meant the book as like a self-help guide, or like this is going to solve all of our problems. But yeah, like just thinking, I think the best part of their criticism was like, yeah, like, what, you think we're going to sit down everyone in America for like this talk that even like she admits in her book, like, yeah, I have a lot of people who just like don't take the diversity training shit like to heart. They just don't really learn a lot from it. She doesn't call it diversity training. It's like, I don't even think she calls it racial sensitivity training. I can't remember what she calls it. Anti-bias training? I don't remember. But like her thing, like in part she's talking about like how she's like learned and like she's figured out better ways to like not trigger white people when trying to talk about this. And I think that's the best takeaway you can get from it, right? If you want to make systemic changes, you need to figure out ways to develop your rhetoric and develop like the policies you want to implement and pitch your policy, figure 60% of our population into the fucking ground about how you're being racist against white people. So if nothing else, I think from a policy level, which they don't really talk about in TMB, I don't even know if they read whatever. I mean, he reads a shitload, so I'm sure he probably read it. I don't know if these two did. I think they might have been talking about it based off like whatever, but I think the value you can get from it from a systemic critique is that you can use the ways in which he said like, hey, this is what triggers the fuck out of people, because like it's literally like traversing a fucking minefield of like how you're going to trigger like what she calls like white fragility, and you can use that to develop like rhetoric to push like systemic policies that would help people, and then just word them and pitch them in such a way that you wouldn't trigger people into the fucking ground. Which is good, because like, I mean, there's a lot of people on the left who have great ideas and just do not know how to present them in a way that is accessible, right? That's one of the things I commend like Bernie Sanders for. He managed to package like good policies with better rhetoric, right? You can have great policies and shit rhetoric, and your policies are going to go pretty much nowhere, right? And you can have bad policies with good rhetoric, and that's the entire Republican platform right there. We're gonna do the worst things imaginable, and we're gonna package it with some good rhetoric and generate like enough support publicly for people to support it, like the tax bill. I mean, I had another video on how the tax bill fucks like everybody except like the top like 2% of the country, 1% of the country. I don't know. You'd be making a shitload of money for the tax bill to give you more benefits than the harm it's going to cause long term. But like most people support that. You can find like the average Trump supporter defending the tax bill, even though they're making like 30, 40K a year on fucking welfare or some shit, and who are going to see the welfare benefits slashed, who are maybe in retirement age and they're going to see Social Security cut or Medicare benefits cut, and their costs are going to increase. And this all comes as a byproduct of the tax bill. But the rhetoric was good. So we need to have leftist like rhetoric, or left-leaning rhetoric, or Democratic Party rhetoric, or something that combines good policies with good fucking rhetoric. And I think what you can take from her book is understanding some of the pitfalls of like rhetoric, where like if I'm talking to someone else who's like a sociology major or whatever, or sufficiently left-leaning, you could talk about a lot of this stuff without it really triggering people, but like that's a niche within like a fucking niche of people who you'd be able to talk to about that. Like this is not, it's not largely accessible, and I don't think her book is necessarily meant to be largely accessible. I don't know how it became a New York Times bestseller, but it is what it is. I guess it comes off really woke, and I think what they do identify is that none of her solutions change anything fundamentally. So like it makes, I guess it's somewhat conspiratorial, but like not really. It's conspiratorial in the same way that like, what does he bitch about, the Bolivian president? Evo Morales, yeah, like Evo Morales, that wasn't a U.S. backed coup, and like people are defending against that. Like, sure, do we have data right now about this being an explicit coup? I think now we do, but like at the point of like the Bolivian president Evo Morales being removed, we didn't. Where the fuck is it? There he is. Yeah, when this guy was like removed, did we have information on it? Like, no, but like we learned it shortly afterwards, and it was unreasonable to suggest that the U.S. would be involved in like a coup relating to a Latin American president. But I'm kind of losing the plot here a little bit. Let's back up. Yeah, I don't think it's unfair to say that part of the thing that makes it more accessible on the left is it doesn't challenge fundamental issues, doesn't have a systemic critique in its conclusion, does not have a systemic critique, and therefore just requires that we all individually be better, which in the corporate environment, as they suggest, helps her out. Like makes you happy that we don't have to change anything. You all just need to be better people. And it's like, no, we need to do systemic things that make the world a better place. And then like racism will slowly dissipate, while we can take more active policies to like get rid of certain like entrenched racism. But whatever. All right, we'll end that there. Outro.